This week in our daily devotions, I'm going to be sharing with you from the end of 1 Corinthians chapter 9 and a good chunk of 1 Corinthians 10. This is one of Paul's very significant letters, and in chapter 9, he begins that chapter talking about his rights as an apostle, that he has the freedom and the right to shape and form his ministry as he chooses, and that includes whether he works for pay, if you will, outside of being an apostle, or whether he is supported as he has a right to be as a proclaimer of the gospel by those who benefit from his ministry. And today in chapter 9, in verses 19 through 23, Paul starts to transition his argument by beginning by saying, "For though I am free with respect to all, I have made myself a slave to all, so that I might win more of them." And that phrase tells you something really significant about Paul. It's that he subjugates, if you will, his freedom so that he can try to win as many people as possible to a transforming and saving relationship with Christ. I encourage you to read verses 19 through 23. And verse 22 is our verse for today. Paul says, "To the weak I became weak, so that I might win the weak. I have become all things to all people, so that I might by all means save some." And if you look, he says in those verses that basically whatever approach he needed to take to a Jew, he became a Jew. Now, what does he mean? Well, if he was already Jewish, what he meant was he would speak to a Jewish person as a fellow Jewish person. Hey, I understand the law. I know the scriptures. Let me talk to you about Christ from that perspective. To those not under the law, to those outside the law, I became one outside the law. He spoke as one who was no longer bound by the law of the Hebrew scriptures because he was now under Christ's law. And that's when he then says, "To the weak I became weak." We want to find in sharing our faith our point of connection. Start with a point of connection, not so much a point of difference. Often, sometimes we may be disappointed or feel like why aren't we more successful in sharing our faith with other people? Sometimes, not always, but sometimes part of that can be the approach that we take. And if the approach that a Christian takes is, "You're wrong, I'm right, I have the answer, you don't," if we come at it from a position of difference, "I have something you don't have," as a starting point, that often puts up a barrier or a wall between us and someone who is not yet a Christian. But if we do what Paul did and we start with our points of connection, what do we share in common with someone? How can we mutually identify with certain things together? That helps us then to build a bridge of relationship that Jesus can walk across. So I just encourage you to remember the importance and the priority of sharing our faith with others, that we might by all means, as Paul says, save some. But remember to do it by building bridges of relationship and connection, and perhaps not so much emphasizing what divides us.